How would you react to seeing a fearsome foe? This story comes from 3.5 edition of Dungeons & Dragons, shortly before 4th edition had come out. And this is a particular story in this one because I was the dungeon master. However, I was telling a campaign/adventure that was not my own. It wasn't exactly a pre-made, and it wasn't story-bought, so at the time, my boss at GameStop was actually going to a technical college to learn game design. And at this technical college, in one of the courses, they would actually use Dungeons & Dragons to help teach the students how to design games. And this is actually a fairly common thing. A lot of other courses in different places have used D&D to help teach students game design, whether it's settings or levels or just making something fun, etc. So this wasn't completely unheard of, and while he was there, his group was tasked with making a Dungeons & Dragons adventure. And then after they had made it, they were tasked with testing it. So they needed some QA testers, and my boss at the time, Greg, who knew that me and my close circle of friends have been playing Dungeons & Dragons for just a long time, approached us about coming in and playtesting this campaign that he made with his group, which is fascinating. I've never done anything like that before, so me and my friends definitely agreed to it because like, yeah, let's do this. Let's see how it goes. So I got nothing beforehand. I showed up, they handed me the play materials, all the players showed up with their own pre-made characters, and we just went for it while the group that designed this sat with our group and just watched and listened to trying to get that real-time feedback. Now for the sake of ease, all the players had shown up with characters that they've used in other campaigns. We're just reusing them for simplicity's sake. So, for example, Shin, the monk, was there, who I've talked about a couple of times before. Todoran, the ranger, was there. They also had, I want to say, a warlock or a wizard. I honestly can't remember what the other character was. It's not too important for this story, but anyway. So we sat down and we began to playtest this adventure setting for this group of college guys. And no joke, the campaign that they gave me to run the players through was all about having to collect 4 treasures of the elements. I wish I was kidding, but you know what? There's 4 people in the group and each person got to design a different dungeon for each of the elements, so I got it. Like, it made sense at the time, but I was still just like a little bit like, God damn it. So it wasn't exactly like a plot-heavy adventure by any means, but again, basic level design for a college course. It was fine. And I had run them through a couple of them at this point. They had gone through the Earth dungeon. I believe that was the first one. It was no problem. They got through that one pretty easily. Nothing extra spectacular to talk about from that. The next one they went through was the Wind dungeon. And that was one of those moments where I had realized that the guys who made this campaign and dungeon had never played D&D before and didn't know how to balance it for players. For example, the characters were maybe level 4, maybe 5, kind of the low end, and they had to fight an air elemental, which would be fine, but air elementals are ethereal, so they can only be damaged by magic and magical weapons. So at one point I saw that and just kind of looked at the guy and said, hey, just so you know, these are ethereal, they can only be hurt by magic, so for the sake of this fight, I'm just going to ignore this. And he's like, oh, all right. So it was stuff like that. They didn't really know how to make a D&D game balance for players. Anyway, so they finally got to the Ice dungeon, and that's where they are now. And there's a lot of very typical ice stuff, which gave me some more things for me to play with. I typically don't. A lot of frozen things everywhere, a lot of icicles and traps. At one point, they came to a room that was just completely frozen over except for a single corner which had like a pool of water, and a water elemental would come out of it and be like, I'm a spooky water elemental. The downside to that was the water elemental couldn't go anywhere because that's all where the water was and the rest was frozen. I had to make some cool attacks. Like I had the water elemental do a like a vortex attack where he like spins around really, really fast and like sprays water everywhere. And I figured since the rest of the room is frozen, that water would instantly freeze into icicles and basically send out like hundreds of tiny daggers at the different players. So like I made stuff up that was not there in the campaign at all. But then as they're exploring through, they've taken a little bit of damage, a little bit of beating. You know, they're not doing too great. And then they enter this room where terror strikes. They see this large, lumbering creature covered in white fur, and it hears them coming, so it begins to stand up and it turns over to them, and it suddenly makes eye contact with this dark, beady eyes, and then they realize he has these massive bear-like paws with nails that could be mistaken for daggers and these large, jagged teeth that look like it chew through any kind of flesh or bone. And as it sees these players, you can see it slowly get hungry as drool comes out, and it just wants to maul everything in front of it. That's how I described the creature. To which one of the players then yells loud enough so that the entire room of playtesters and college students could hear, "That's a goddamn Yeti!" Where we start losing it a little bit, we start laughing, because yes, it was a Yeti. They straight up had a Yeti in this fight. I described it more like a Wampa from Star Wars, but like it was enough to turn some heads in the other room, and I think even like the college professor was like, "Oh, keep it down a little bit," and off the players go to engage against this Yeti in the middle of this ice palace. Again, pretty typical ice palace enemy or whatever, but this room was designed more like a room you would find in a Legend of Zelda game. So the entire floor was encased in ice. Everything was frozen over. And then like the walls of this room itself, it was either, I want to say he made like actual ice spikes, but basically sticking out everywhere. So several dangers: frozen floor, spiked walls, Yeti. And right away, the players were just like, "Oh shit!" And they went to attack it. So Tadori, the ranger, immediately pulls out an arrow, knocks it, flings it over at the Yeti. Doesn't quite roll enough, so the arrow actually like shatters against the Yeti's tough hide. And then the other player casts some spell. I can't exactly remember what. But then Shin, being Shin, sees this Yeti and just goes in for a melee attack against it. So his plan was to sprint at this Yeti, jump, and then slide across the ice with his foot out to like slide tackle the Yeti so the Yeti would like fall down prone, making it easier for like Doran to shoot him. So which I said, "All right, man, you're running across ice, so you're going to have to make a dexterity saving throw, or reflex save, or acrobatics, whatever roll I did, to make sure he could get across this ice." So he's like, "Okay," makes the roll, succeeds. He actually does it. He actually managed to like use this ice exactly how he wanted. The fleet-footed monk, using his monk speed, leaps up into the air, lands, starts slide tackling into the Yeti. And since it was basically like a sort of grapple attack, they had to do opposed strength rolls. Shin vastly underestimates the strength of a Yeti. So they do the rolls, and the Yeti wins. So it just fails. So you basically see Shin do this like super amazing leap through the air, and then lands, starts getting super fast into the Yeti's leg, and just goes, "Pick." And the Yeti looks down at him, and then it's the Yeti's turn and initiative, who immediately just takes a big paw, just slaps him right across the face, and succeeds, deals a crap ton of damage. And then I figured, you know what, this entire floor is made of ice, and this Yeti, according to the stat block that they provided me, has a strength of 19. So it slaps Shin, and then just makes him skid across the room on the ice, just spinning the entire time, just into the spike walls for extra damage. So just, Brack, oh no, slide, and then like stab into the walls, kind of going like, then he get like that's the closest thing they had to a melee fighter, and he just got super messed up. So they just keep firing arrows at this point. The spellcaster is shooting spells back and forth, doing whatever they can. when Shin finally gets back up from his precarious position, he was much more cautious at that point in time. He's went in for like more kind of basic melee hits rather than anything too insane. He didn't want to fall over on the ice again or look dumb, because let's face it, that is the most painful thing that you could do to Shin. And I do recall at this point, because there is no Yeti in the monster manual at all, so they had to make up their entire own monster for it, which is fine, because on the back, there actually is a entire chapter for creating your own monster. In fact, I want to say part of the course was that they had to make their own monster. I might be mistaken about that. I'll have to ask Greg. But either way, I would look at the stat blocks and I saw how the players were doing, and I kind of realized that they weren't gonna win this fight, and they also weren't retreating. It was, you know, it was like a one-off dungeon, so they were being a little more overzealous than usual. So I kind of started scaling back the Yeti's damage rolls and hit points a little bit, you know, kind of behind the Dungeon Master screen. And I even pointed it out. I leaned over to the other guy who made this and kind of pointed it out non-verbally. He's like, hey, they're gonna die. I don't want them to, so that they can test the rest of your dungeon. And he just kind of gives me like a silent nod. It's like, yeah, that makes sense, which is good, because there was almost a total party wipe against a goddamn Yeti.